Thank you. This is a meeting of the Public Works Committee. Can we start by having everyone stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Eric, are you going to help us with notes tonight?
Yep.
I guess we'll start off with roll call.
Chairman DeSecchi?
Here.
Trustee Fritz?
Here.
Trustee Flug?
Here. So tonight we're going to have a presentation on the project, the flood project, and our engineers are going to have a PowerPoint presentation for everyone. We're going to follow that up with a map before and after of what the floodplain looked like before and what it looked like after. And then we're going to open up the meeting to some questions and answers. After that, we'll close the meeting. And just so everyone knows, even when the meeting is officially over, we'll have our engineers here and staff here to answer any questions about any of the posters that are here. Or if you want to come up to the screen, we can show your home up there and how the new proposed flood map is going to look in relation to your home. So there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers, and specifically to look at your residence and where it falls in with the map.
Thank you, Chairman DeSecchi. My name is Brad Townsend. I'm village manager here in Schiller Park, and I just want to say, in addition to what the chairman just mentioned, is that we have for you tonight what was really a voluntary project in joint cooperation with the village of Franklin Park to bring this whole question of the possibility of changing the floodplain boundaries to a study, and then depending on those results, bringing that forward to the appropriate federal and state agencies, which that's another thing that the engineers can address going forward. But this is a very positive, proactive effort on the part of the two communities to at least take this step forward, to take a close look at this, because you know, if we hadn't done this, maybe it would just continue to go along without any action. So this is a proactive way to address it. So in addition to the members that are here tonight, I think we have some other members of the village board here. Mayor Piltaver is here. We also, I believe, Trustee Lima is somewhere there. And I think that's the full complement of the board that's able to make it here tonight.
Claudia.
Is Claudia show up? Our village clerk? Oh, she did make it. Okay, you said you might make it. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Claudia. All right, so the staff and professionals that were working on this project on your behalf are here this evening. And I just want to mention, maybe you can stand up and identify yourselves, because a couple of you will be doing a lot of talking on this. But the first group is from our specialty engineering firm that worked on this, Christopher B. Burke Engineering. And if you could stand up, Gina Gowan, it was the lead engineer on this. There's also Mike Burke and Don Dresser. If I got your name right, your last name, hopefully I may have messed it up. And then we also have our village engineer here, Patrick Glenn. And also, as the chairman of the committee, Mr. DeSecchi mentioned, we have Eric here. Eric Oscarson is our public works director. We have our acting community development director over there running the camera, Eric Tyson. And also helping us with some of the information technology support on this is a couple of people from our consultants with the consortium, MGP. We have Alyssa Pump and Tom Tomey back there. And last but not least, our assistant village manager, Brian Bursick, who many of you know, he's been around here for a while. Okay, so I think at this point, as you had indicated, I think we should have Gina come forward and then present how you feel best suits the group here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Again, I'm Gina Gunn with Christopher Burke Engineering. This has been a very long process, but we are here to present the results of the Crystal Creek Watershed Study. It incorporates the IDNR flood control project, in addition to doing the FEMA letter of map revision that is going to be moving forward as a result of that project.
Could you talk into the microphone better?
Yep. As many of you know, this is a project that's been going on for quite some time. It was initially spearheaded by the Department of Natural Resources as a result of the 1987 flood event. So we're almost 30 years into this, but between 1991 and 2014, the DNR designed and constructed this project, the flood control project along Crystal Creek and its tributaries. And so what we're here tonight is to present to you the results of our hydrologic and hydraulic analysis and how it affects you. The brief presentation we're going to give to you, we're just going to give you the purpose of the study, a watershed overview, discuss the IDNR flood control components, show you the revised floodplain boundaries, and then give you the permitting timeline, which I think is something that's very interesting, or everybody here is very interested in. So the village watershed overview, the village is approximately 1,800 acres. There are 3 distinct watersheds located within the village. It is Silver Creek, Crystal Creek, and the Des Plaines River, of which about 61% of the village is located within the Crystal Creek watershed. Again, since that's the whole purpose why we're here tonight, we are going to focus on it. So there are many communities that are located within the Crystal Creek watershed, including the city of Chicago, which a majority of that is O'Hare Airport. This whole entire watershed area boundary is approximately 6 square miles. It also includes the village of Rosemont, which is highlighted in red, the village of Bensonville, which is just a tiny sliver on the western side of the airport, an area of unincorporated Cook County, Franklin Park, and Schiller Park. So this here is just a map showing the municipal boundary and the FEMA effective floodplain and floodway map. Again, this is not the watershed boundary, this is simply just the municipal boundary, just showing the different floodplain and floodway within your community. So like I previously mentioned, between 1991 and 2014, the Department of Natural Resources designed and constructed 4 unique flood control projects along the Crystal Creek watershed, or within the watershed. The goal was to reduce residential and commercial flooding for 670 affected parcels. The first project was the construction of a bypass culvert along Lawrence Avenue. It extends from the eastern side of the CP rail yard to the east side of River Road, and then discharges to the existing outlet point that Crystal Creek discharges into, and ultimately going to the Des Plaines River, which is located in the Forest Preserve. The second project was the removal and replacement and upsizing of culverts within the CP rail yard. The third one is channel improvements from the upstream end of 25th Street to the upstream end of Wehrman Avenue. This was not only channel improvements, it also included the reconstruction of crossings through there, including Montrose and Irving Park Road. And then the last and final component of the watershed flood control improvement was the relocation of Sexton Ditch, which is located in the south side of Schiller Park and the north side of Franklin Park. It was putting Sexton Ditch into a bypass box culvert along one of the streets and discharging just north of its existing confluence. So the project schedule and timeline. So we've come all this way, and we've got all the modeling done, we've got our mapping done. As you can see, it's all around the room. Our next step after we get feedback from you is to take this submittal and send it to the Department of Natural Resources, and they will sign off for and do an approval of what our project is and all of our hydraulic modeling that we had to use to represent this mapping. It's typically an 8 to 12 months time frame. We are going to hopefully be very optimistic with this, simply because it was a DNR project to begin with. It was their study that we based all of our analyses on. So hopefully that will go on the less side of the time frame. But again, it is a public agency. We are at the mercy of the government. It has nothing to do with the village of Schiller Park or the village of Franklin Park. It is simply just a state process that we have to go through. Once we get approval from the DNR, we will submit to FEMA Fortunately, we are in Region 5 of FEMA, which we do not have to submit to Washington DC. We get to submit to the Illinois State Water Survey, who acts as our governing body for FEMA here for projects like this, and they are in Champaign. So hopefully, because it's a little bit more local, we can also get this through a little bit quicker. But again, the time frame is typically 8 to 12 months. So what we're talking about is an overall FEMA map revision time frame from the day that we submit to the DNR and to the day it gets remapped is 16 to 24 months. One thing that we are looking for here tonight with you is you know your watershed better than we will ever know it. And so what we need from you is any kind of feedback. Do you think that your property has been inadvertently mapped in the floodplain? Do you have better survey that maybe we don't have? Those are the kinds of things that we need from you. You know, we learn from you as much as you learn from us, which is awesome. So again, thank you for coming. So that's what we are looking for as far as the time frame is concerned. The project itself, so this is our end product. The Volmar on the left is the effective map. Excuse me, I apologize. Is the effective flood insurance rate map, and the one on the right is what we are proposing to be, what we will submit to the Department of Natural Resources and to FEMA for our map revision. Again, I want to reiterate, these are draft, are subject to change based on review comments that we may receive from these regulatory agencies. However, we are optimistic with what our project produces. And one thing we want to reiterate, and like Pat mentioned, the project is done. So the real benefit here is that homes that were previously flooded are not going to be flooded as a result of this project, which is what the ultimate goal was. This is just kind of a nice piece to tie it all together. So with that, I'll turn it to Alyssa. She's going to show you the difference, the previous map and the new map.
Thank you, Gina. Just waiting to get the map. So as Brian mentioned earlier, my name is Alyssa Pump, and I am from MGP, the managing partner of the GIS Consortium. And today, I would like to show you an interactive map that was requested to help assist the information you heard tonight, as well as be placed on the village website for residential viewing. The interactive map that you see tonight features a description on the top left-hand corner of the screen, and just below that, there are two layers in this map, and that is the FEMA floodplain layer, as well as the revised Crystal Creek floodplain layer. What the map shows is it also has, in the center, is the interactive map. So when you take the center bar that you see Brian moving back and forth, when you take that and slide it left to right, you will see the blue disappear, and you will see the red Crystal Creek floodplain layer show up. So as you can see, as you move left to right, this changes from what the Crystal Creek has looked like in the FEMA floodplain layer to now what the revised Crystal Creek floodplain is currently showing. If you have any questions, or if you would like to see another demonstration of this map, please let me know and I'll be staying afterwards to answer any questions you may have.
Nelson, will you be able to later on walk through your specific residents and all that stuff? So at this time, Gina and Pat, I wanted to turn it over to you to see what questions the residents may have. If you can help them out with that. I'll turn it over to the experts. So if anyone has questions, please raise your hand and we'll do our best to answer them.
Yes, sir.
I was looking at the manual over here by West Avenue, and I noticed that there was a part in red that had stripes on it that was a floodway, and the rest of it's in a floodplain. What's the difference between them?
So the floodplain is a boundary that is determined, it is the base flood elevation. I'm sure many of you have heard the 1% chance flood. Some people refer to it as the 100-year flood. It does not mean that it happens once every 100 years. I think we all know that. But it is the chance of that storm happening, a 1% chance of that storm happening in any given year. So the floodway boundary is the boundary that is, it's an encroachment of that same floodplain, but it is the area that we have determined that is required to carry the flow of Crystal Creek through that portion of the creek. So through that portion of the watershed, that's how wide it would need to be. So, and that is regulated by the Department of Natural Resources. And although it just shows a little bit differently, it still also has to follow the same FEMA floodplain guidelines as well. So it just has, it's got a little bit more, it's a little more strict requirements since it is the area that is required for conveyance purposes.
Okay, so basically it's just the way the water flows is how that determines it's a
Yeah.
floodway? Okay.
Does anybody have any more general questions?
Gina, how does insurance play in with a floodplain versus a floodway?
It's the same. So it's all governed by the National Flood Insurance Program. So if you are in the floodway, you are also in the floodplain. So. Yes.
Well, my house, when I first moved here, it was located half in and half out, and now it's the same way.
So that is the one thing. So what we use to map these, this floodplain, we use what we call best available data. And so when we did a whole entire watershed like this, the best available data is the Cook County 1-foot topo. Now, obviously, your home cannot be half in and half out. And so that is where we need to come to you. You will have better data than we will have. And this is probably something that Pat would be able to address as far as if we would go with structures like that in particular. So.
Yeah, I think there's, however this gets mapped, of course, there's always a boundary. Somebody's on this side of the boundary and somebody's on that side of the boundary. The goal right now is to get the maps revised, get through the big picture, get 400 plus houses out of the floodplain. Once the maps are final and all that flood elevations have been determined and agreed to by FEMA, then comes the opportunity to look individually at each house along kind of that fringe. There's a process that FEMA has for getting a letter of map amendment or a letter of map revision based on local information to say, hey, when you're at the 3,000 foot level as the feds, these are the elevations you're using. But I had a surveyor come out, they measured carefully around my house, and it's actually just a little bit higher than you thought. And then you get an actual letter from FEMA. They don't change the map, but they issue a letter of map amendment, and it's a piece of paper that you keep. And then if your lender, for instance, were requiring flood insurance, you would show them this letter and say, no, FEMA has removed my structure, so I don't have those same requirements. So step one is the broad remapping and getting the new maps final. And then step two is nibbling around that fringe of the few houses that are right on the edge to see if we can bring forward more detailed information to have those individual structures receive that letter from FEMA.
So I just have to play the waiting game more or less then? Or what?
Well, we've been playing the waiting game for 30 years on this, and rest assured that between Schiller Park, Regional Park, and all the consultants and professionals that are involved here, everybody's pushing this as much as they can. We are, of course, up against some state agencies. They all have their own pressures and issues, and budget issues, and staff issues, but in every regard, to the extent that anybody at either of these communities can, we are pushing for these approvals.
It's crazy, because like the front of my house is out, the back half is like right by Crystal Creek, okay? So they have that's in the flood zone. They did all the work and everything over in that area, so I would think that that would take it automatically out of it.
We can certainly look specifically at your house once we get, because just so everybody's clear, once we get done with the general questions here and close the formal meeting, everybody's staying here. We can go to the boards or find a particular house on the other map here. Certainly, a big part of what we're doing here tonight is any specific information that you folks have about your properties to bring forward to us so that we can try to incorporate that, whether it goes into this first set of data that goes to the DNR, or maybe it's information that later we can get in between the DNR and FEMA to really fine-tune this thing. The goal here is to make the maps as accurate as they can be. So wherever we can bring in more detailed information, we certainly will.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Once the map is done, and let's say, for instance, somebody is still in the floodplain, but they've never flooded, they feel they shouldn't be in it. Now, would they be required, or would they be able to go to, let's say, a surveyor and say, you know, can you come out? What is the cost for that for a homeowner, and is it something that you would recommend that they do?
So there is that process. If you have reason to believe that you're incorrectly mapped in the floodway, even after all this is done, that's that process I was talking about of getting detailed ground information for your particular home. Cost-wise, different folks, you're probably looking at $500, maybe $1,000 to have somebody come out and do all those measurements and fill out the paperwork and submit it to FEMA. Relative to what an annual flood insurance premium is, that might not be a bad spend. My suggestion would be that once we get these maps final, you can check in with the village, because we have, we can at least look at that general mapping and give you a sense for if it seems likely that going through that effort is going to get you the result that you want. The last thing you want to do is hire somebody, spend $1,000, and they come out and say, no, actually you are still in the floodplain. I would not predicate my decision to pursue this based on the fact that you haven't been flooded in the whole time that you've been there. Believe it or not, we hear that a lot. The reality is, in a lot of places, we haven't seen what FEMA considers to be that 100-year flood. We've seen some big floods, we've seen some devastating floods, but the FEMA might actually say, well, actually, we think it could even get higher than that. So just the fact that you've been there a long, long time and you have not had a damaging flood won't automatically mean that if you go through the effort of having that surveyor out and taking those elevations, you're going to get removed. So I would definitely, where village staff can help, we can look at local information and plans and such that we might have on record and try and give you a sense for, is it worth it for me to go through this effort to have anybody out? But that process is there for that very detailed and granular look at each property.
A couple of questions. Are we going to be notified as this goes on forward, or it goes forward, on notifications on what the process is throughout the year?
The question is, will folks be notified on the process? The answer is yes. The village will regularly, when we reach milestones through the process here, if certainly we'll have information in the village newsletter and on the village website. And when we hit milestones, when we've submitted to DNR, when we're through DNR, when it's on to FEMA, when it gets through, and then I'm sure that we'll also have some materials that we start to pull together as the process gets a little further along for all these folks that are the map's changing and they're coming out of the floodplain. Chris Burke's office has put together the layman's informational package of, hey, great, I'm out of the floodplain. What do I tell my insurance guy so that I'm not paying that same flood insurance premium that I was paying before? So there will be periodic updates on the website and the newsletter. And then when we think we're getting closer to the finish line, there'll be actual materials available to these property owners that are coming out of the floodplain to help them out. Because that's the next step. We get the maps fixed. Then we have to, each individual homeowner has to then go through that next process of getting their insurance premiums adjusted to reflect that as well. Yes, sir.
For that individual that's been here or at that house, that flood zone, for 40 years and is probably not paying for flood insurance, doesn't need it, how does he go forward if he were to move or sell the house for the next resident or, next buyer?
The question, if I understand, is for the homeowner that's there now and perhaps doesn't have a mortgage or has no requirement to carry flood insurance, and somebody else is going to come in and there will be a new loan, how does that process work? A couple of suggestions. Throughout this process, even if you're not required to have flood insurance, whether you're mapped out or, particularly if you're mapped out, I would emphasize that, some larger flood than what's on these maps can happen somewhere. And flood insurance isn't a bad thing in and of itself, right? It's the premiums that are the difficulty. If you are mapped out of the floodplain, or even if today you're not in the floodplain and you're right next to it, FEMA has what's called a preferred risk policy. You get all the same coverage as anybody else who has flood insurance, but the premiums are an order of magnitude less. They're very, very affordable premiums. So my answer to you would be if you're moving out, somebody else is moving in, I would definitely document your particular property with the tools that we have here. When the new maps come out, FEMA has an online process of making official flood insurance maps that you can zoom to a particular property. The village's GIS will always have whatever is the current floodplain layer on it. So there's all sorts of ways that we can help you document the fact that a particular property is no longer mapped in the floodplain and communicate that to a potential buyer.
So there's a chance that as this goes forward, that certain scales will be on the lower scale, like for what you're saying for the insurance claim.
Correct. The question is that certain premiums are going to get scaled down. And the answer is yes, even for people that are still in the floodplain, because the flood elevations themselves are going down. When they calculate your flood insurance premium, it's not so much where the line is horizontally, it's really a function of if the engineers say that this flood's going to make the water, it's going to get this high, and your lowest floor is here. It's the difference, basically how deep will that property flood, how deep will it be for that structure, is what drives the premium. So even for properties that are still in the floodplain, you should still see an adjustment in that premium because the risks, the damages aren't the same. So I think I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. There's no chance it's going to be totally eliminated, is there?
No. Chris Burke's office has worked very, very hard to use the best information that they have to get the most accurate maps they can get. But the reality is, there's still, when we have these biblical floods, there's an enormous amount of water that has to get through a limited space, and there's still going to be areas that flood. There's still areas that are just simply low, the ground is low, and all the channel work in the world won't keep those areas from flooding when we get these really, really big storms. So it's unfortunate, but some properties just simply are in an area that couldn't be protected with this project.
Patrick, or Gina, if just a part of a person's property or parcel is in that floodplain, it's considered to be in the floodplain?
Brad's question was if just a portion of the property is mapped in the floodplain, does that impact the entire property? And the answer is no. When you do this process of demonstrating to FEMA that, fine-tuning that floodplain, if you will, for your property, there is a process just to say, hey, there's some floodplain on my lot, but my house is not in the floodplain. And that happens a lot. If you look at generally how houses are built, the house sits up a little bit from the rest of the yard. So there's a process to get FEMA to concur that the building itself is not in the floodplain, even though portions of the property are. There's also, through that same process, you can do it differently and actually describe a portion of the entire property to be removed. If you're thinking that you might do an addition someday, or you want to make more quote-unquote buildable area for the property, and you can demonstrate that, hey, the north half of my lot is all out of the floodplain. There's a process to get that specific with FEMA, and then that letter will say here is a very detailed description of the area that's not in. So it really, if just a corner of your property is in, it doesn't mean that the house is in and you can get that house removed. It may be wise to do that. For instance, when you're transferring property, every time you buy a house, right, there's a $50 charge on there for somebody to look at a map and say whether or not it's in the floodplain. When they're looking at maps at these scales, they might not, it looks close, so they're going to say, okay, this house is in. Well, if you have that determination from FEMA, then even though that $50 review said that you were in, you can show your lender or a potential buyer, no, actually, FEMA concurred that the house itself is not in the floodplain. Yes, ma'am.
This is actually the situation that happened with my parents' house. We've been trying to handle this for years. Only a little corner of their lot in front is in the flood zone, and we've been denied, even though the entire house and then the back and the front is free of flood zone, and they've been paying the flood zone insurance for years now. And I've been trying to fight it, but they said no.
You and I should talk when we get to the breakout group
And
here,
it's
and we'll
been
take a
years.
close look at that. Any other questions from the audience? And remember that once we come back here and close out the formal meeting, the staff and engineers will stay around here, look at particular situations and take in any information that you have.
So, Pat,
Okay.
So as of today, people who are paying flood insurance, or if they're buying a home or selling a home, we have to use the information we have today. And just to get the timeline clear for everyone, we have to wait for the DNR to improve it, for FEMA to improve it, for the new maps to be posted before anything changes. Is that?
That's correct. Until FEMA approves the final mapping, the old maps, the regulatory maps remain regulatory. That's all the lender's going to look at. That's all, if you're coming in for building permits, that's still the current effective information. It's still how everything is regulated. We cannot start to permit by or make any decisions based on the new floodplain elevations until FEMA approves those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian, could you tell us what information we have or will have on our website?
Absolutely, Trustee DeSecchi. We have a webpage on the new website, which was just launched a couple weeks ago, that is for our GIS mapping program. And that mapping program webpage, which is reachable from the services tab on the top of the website, is going to have a link to the map that Alyssa showed you earlier, so that you can look at it and zoom into your heart's content and zoom out and see what the effect is of our proposed new flood map. That will allow you to take however much time you want to look at it, and then eventually, if you have questions, you can then come back to the village. But we will have this entire map on the website, and then when we have updates, as was stated by the village engineer, Pat Glenn, we will publish things in the village newsletter as well as on the village website. We'll have news articles. We will have stuff potentially on the electronic sign outside of Irving Park Road as well. So the goal is to get the information out to you as this process moves forward and as we make further progress.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have any other questions from anyone in the room?
No. Could I just make one closing?
Sure.
I just wanted to build a little bit on something that Gina mentioned. I know that For a lot of people sitting here, but the main thing you heard was, oh man, 2 more years until we get this thing done. The important thing, the really important thing here, and I know the flood insurance premiums aren't cheap, but the very important part is that this project got completed. The reality on the ground when we get this next great big rainstorm is there will literally be hundreds of homes that would have suffered damages before this project are not going to be damaged by that flood. So perhaps what I hope everybody kind of walks out of here with is as frustrating as it may be that we have to go through this process, the real heavy lifting has been done. And the next time Crystal Creek floods, and of course I wouldn't tell you that nobody's going to flood, but an awful lot of people that would have had their homes damaged won't have their homes damaged. And that to me is really the takeaway from all of this, is that a 30-year process, we're getting very, very close to the finish line.
The water doesn't hurt us more than the premiums do.
Especially when it's not raining.
Yeah, exactly.
And right along with that, and Eric O. here would agree that maintaining that creek as clean as we possibly can is very important. In fact, weren't your crew out there cleaning some items out of that creek that had floated in there, maybe even tossed in there, we don't know. So maintenance of that is very, very important, not just from the beautification of it, because it can be a nice looking pathway of the coursing through the town, but really it's the practical flow of water through that channel. So we can all be part of helping do that. So if you see something or even hear something something that might be in there, let us know. We've got to keep that thing flowing clearly and freely.
Yes?
You should take a look at it right now before it rains. There is a little boat in there right now. It's a sled and a bunch of garbage in it right now.
Where is it?
Right at 25th, when I walk in.
Okay, thank
It's a
you.
plastic boat.
It's all green.
Sorry I brought it up. No, I'm just kidding. But no, that's right. We need to take care of that stuff. You want to mention something, Eric, about it?
That's actually ours. We're in the process of cleaning it. Because it's a waterway and we have limited access to it, instead of throwing up, cutting down the branches and throwing up in people's backyards, we've been floating it down to the nearest access point. So staff was out there today, staff will be out there possibly tomorrow, depending on the weather, but staff will be out all week. We're removing any of the growth that's gone in there. We're doing hand removal of the material in there. So if you see anything in there that's ours, it's just the best way we can get it out of there without causing too much damage. It's temporary, it'll be gone by the end of the week, so.
There you go. Thank you for that.
Put our name on it.
Thank you, Eric. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, I'm going to close out the official part of this meeting, but remember again, please stick around, ask questions, talk with our engineers. And again, if you have any questions, we want to be able to answer them. So,
Make a motion to adjourn.
thank you, Larry.
I second.
Okay, meeting adjourned.